So this is the charity organization movement presentation by Isaac Ortiz and Cyrus Shields. So basically, for a little bit of historical context here, there was no form of government given welfare as we know it today. During this time, there was no Medicaid, no Social Security, no unemployment. And so basically, this was the only form of organized welfare that we saw during this time. So the goals of the charity organization societies were more so actually control rather than assistance for the impoverished because they had these rigid moral standards that determined who could really get the aid that they were giving, which really wasn't much aid at all. Andrew Carnegie's The Gospel of Wealth is a really good example of the mindset of the rich people during this era. So, Andrew Carnegie, of course, was someone very rich off of steel and was a philanthropist. And his sort of idea and the idea of a lot of rich people was that poor people couldn't be trusted with direct, blind, money or food or just real tangible assistance. And that sort of the rich who knew how to handle money should be the ones that were really determining how to help them. And so these agents were sent to the families who sort of supervised them and gave them moral instruction on how to have better morals and a better, I guess, mindset and like advice and stuff like that. And also a lot of it was sort of a scientific study about like what the causes of poverty were, but they came in sort of with the preconceived notion that the causes of poverty were the fault of the poor and not the fault of the system. And so, an example is the charity organization Society of New York City, which was founded by Josephine Shaw Lowell, and it sort of sought to connect various organizations from different places. And so it would sometimes refer families to a place of employment, or it would refer them sort of to another charity. And so, at the time, the various branches of charity organizations were sort of disconnected and isolated. So it might have been a worthy investment, except for the fact that the poor people really weren't being given any tangible assistance. So it was just sort of an unnecessary bureaucratic level added there that really didn't help anyone in the end. So the successes sort of this movement was the scientific studies determined that the moral weakness really was the cause of poverty, and so that sort of appeased the rich people into thinking, well, it's not my fault, it's not the system that I benefit off of's fault, it's just the fault of the poor people. So I shouldn't feel bad. I should actually feel great about myself for giving away, my services and my money. It neglected how poor wages, long hours, stuff like that, and like unrestricted capitalism was really the source of poverty. Completely neglected that. An interesting impact was that the scientific studies of this social workers grew into the profession of social work as we know it today, which is funny because even though now it has tangible and good impacts on people, it started out as something that really wasn't helping the poor people. So really, it had successes for those who were funding it, the rich people who didn't want to really give up their wealth, but it did not have true successes for the people who were impoverished, and it did not pull them out of the poverty that they were suffering under.
What were the causes of the rise in charity organization societies during the Gilded Age? So, obviously, poverty was what led to the necessity of a higher form of aid, but what were the root causes of this poverty? So, for one, there was a higher demand for industrial jobs and unskilled laborers, and as a result, immigrants as well as U.S. citizens flocked to U.S. cities. In fact, during this era, urban residents actually outnumbered country residents for the first time in U.S. history. So, with the exponential growth of industrial jobs and city populations came many problems just overall linked with poverty. For example, housing communities were overcrowded and they could not keep up with the population increase brought upon by the demand for industrial jobs. And these jobs also paid extremely low wages, which only contributed to widespread poverty and lack of housing. On the right side of the slide, you can see the housing conditions of working class Americans during the Gilded Age. In New York, these houses were called tenements, and they often constricted entire families to just one room. Tenements brought upon many health problems, and the overall state of housing, health, and poverty in cities was just a crisis. So, this led to a demand for a more coordinated form of aid that could help more people more effectively. And therefore, charity organization societies were formed which attempted to coordinate the work of private charities to create a more systematic and effective method of providing relief. Now, whether these charity organization societies genuinely did help impoverished people is definitely debatable, but nonetheless, they were formed overall due to factors such as immigration, population increase, lack of housing, and low wages. We can see programs that parallel charity organization societies today in the form of modern government welfare programs. These programs operate by using tax dollars to provide aid to impoverished citizens. 6 major welfare programs exist under the government today, which are all listed here. But I think the ones that most closely resemble charity organization societies of the Gilded Age are housing assistance programs and Medicaid. So, lack of housing was a huge problem during the Gilded Age, and charity organization societies' main issue that they tackled was lack of housing. And as for Medicaid, Medicaid also tackles issues that were seen especially in the Gilded Age because injuries and overall lack of health were super prevalent with dangerous factory conditions and unsanitary living conditions. Now, while modern welfare programs parallel charity organization societies in the issues that they focus on, they highly differ from those of the Gilded Age because they're much more coordinated and they provide better relief that more often can genuinely lift people out of poverty. This is because charity organization societies didn't provide genuine financial aid to the poor. Rather, rich people would come to poor areas as ambassadors and assess the cause of poverty of an individual or family and attempt to help them with advice or sometimes money. This meant that welfare during the Gilded Age was dependent on how generous the rich were in a given year. And as you can probably tell, this rarely actually helped impoverished people, whereas modern programs are government subsidized, meaning that they provide guaranteed consistent aid, which can genuinely help impoverished people gain the services that they need and prosper in life. This is our Works Cited page. It includes 5 sources that show where we got all of our information.